Every summer for 9 years, my parents packed my bags, left me at my eccentric aunt's dilapidated house, and drove away. They claimed it was because I was difficult, but the real reason was much simpler. My golden child brother wanted family vacations without me spoiling his aesthetic. For 9 summers, I watched their sun-drenched beach pictures while I scrubbed floors and helped my aunt construct an off-grid cabin. They thought they were abandoning their unwanted daughter, but they were actually handing me the exact tools I needed to vanish. The day I received my college diploma, I was already settled in a new city, under a new name, with a life they knew nothing about. It took them 4 long years to find me. But by the time they appeared at my driveway begging for help, the tables had completely turned. Make sure to comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Poppy Whitmore. I'm 29 years old. And if you looked through my family's old photo albums, you'd think I disappeared every summer. Growing up, my younger brother Julian was the center of our universe. My parents treated him like royalty, while I was treated like an unwanted roommate. But the real nightmare began when I turned 10. Every year on exactly June 1st, my parents would pack my bags, put me in the back of the car, and drive 4 hours into rural Oregon. Their destination: my Aunt Martha's secluded, run-down property. My parents' excuse was always identical. Poppy is simply too difficult to handle right now. She needs discipline. They made it sound as though they were sending me to a summer camp for troubled children. But the truth was much simpler and infinitely more painful. Julian wanted family vacations without me ruining his aesthetic. While I was abandoned in the middle of nowhere, my parents and brother spent their summers flying to Hawaii, relaxing on beaches in Europe, and staying at 5-star resorts. I only ever saw those vacations through glossy postcards Julian mailed to brag, or the framed photographs my mother proudly hung around our living room when they returned. For 9 straight years, from age 10 to 19, I was discarded every single summer so my brother could pretend he was an only child. My parents believed they were punishing me, but they had no clue what was actually happening in that little Oregon town. My parents thought Aunt Martha's house was a dusty prison sentence, but it became the ultimate training ground. Martha wasn't merely an eccentric relative living in the woods. She was a retired master contractor and a clever real estate investor who had spent decades creating her own independence. While my parents were busy pampering Julian at 5-star resorts, Martha gave me a tool belt, a tape measure, and a pile of financial ledgers. They think they're sending you here to suffer, Poppy. Martha told me during my 2nd summer, her voice calm and firm. So, let's make sure you leave here so strong they can never control you again. She didn't simply teach me how to survive, she taught me how to build. By 12, I understood framing, basic electrical wiring, and plumbing. But more importantly, Martha taught me financial literacy. She explained compound interest, credit scores, and property deeds. Every dollar I earned helping her renovate nearby cabins went directly into a high-yield savings trust she had quietly created in my name. The difference between my 2 lives was unbelievable. In winter, I was the unwanted shadow in my parents' home. In summer, I was an apprentice creating a real future. The final turning point came during my 5th summer. I discovered an email my mother had printed and left on Martha's kitchen counter. It said, "Keep Poppy occupied out there. Julian deserves to experience what it's like to be an only child without her ruining our family dynamic." Reading those words destroyed any remaining desire I had for their love. My parents didn't simply want a break. They wanted to pretend I didn't exist. They thought they were tossing me aside. They had no idea they were handing me the blueprint for my escape. Once I understood the truth, I stopped resisting my parents. In fact, I played the part of the quiet, obedient daughter to absolute perfection. During the school years, I kept my head down, maintained a high GPA, and allowed my parents to believe I was weak, submissive, and completely dependent on them. They were so focused on funding Julian's lavish lifestyle, private tutors, and endless hobbies that they barely noticed me. They assumed I would simply continue existing in their shadow forever. Behind the scenes, though, I was carrying out a carefully calculated long-game strategy, using every lesson Martha had taught me. I opened a private bank account the day I turned 18, completely separated from my parents' name. While they covered my basic state college tuition, the absolute minimum they felt legally required to pay, I worked 2 secret side jobs as a draftsperson and small-scale renovation assistant. Every paycheck, along with the money from my summer trust, went straight into high-yield investments and building an impeccable credit score. By my junior year of college, while Julian was failing his classes and expecting our parents to buy him a brand new sports car, I was quietly purchasing my first piece of real estate, a neglected duplex across state lines in Washington. With Aunt Martha as my co-signer and advisor, I renovated the entire property myself during my free weekends, turning it into a high-value asset that started producing steady rental income before I even graduated. My parents believed they were keeping me trapped inside a cage by withholding their affection and support. They had no idea I had already unlocked the door, built a bridge, and was simply waiting for the perfect moment to walk away forever. The day of my college graduation was supposed to be a huge milestone, but to my parents, it was merely an inconvenience. 3 weeks before the ceremony, my mother casually revealed the news over dinner. Julian had just finished high school, and as his reward, they were taking him on a month-long luxury tour through Italy. When I asked about my graduation, my father didn't even lift his eyes from his phone. "Poppy, you're only getting a bachelor's degree. It's not a big deal. We'll celebrate when we return. Besides, Julian worked really hard this year." Julian had barely passed, but it didn't matter. They left for Europe 4 days before I walked across the stage. I stood in my cap and gown completely alone, with no family in the bleachers except Aunt Martha, who secretly flew in to watch me receive my diploma with highest honors. That afternoon, while my parents were drinking wine in Tuscany, I carried out my plan. I drove to their house one final time with a moving truck. Within 3 hours, I packed every single possession I owned into the back. I closed the joint bank account my mother had opened for me as a teenager, transferred the balance into my private account, and changed my phone number. I even arranged for my mail to be forwarded directly to a P.O. box in Washington. On the kitchen island, right beside the framed family photograph from their Hawaii vacation that I had been excluded from, I left a simple printed note. "Thank you for covering my basic tuition and funding the education of the daughter you never wanted. Your obligation is complete. Do not attempt to contact me." By sunset, I was settled into my new home, completely beyond their reach. For 4 entire years, I lived in complete peace. My Washington duplex prospered, and with Aunt Martha's continued guidance, I expanded my business, launching a boutique design and contracting company. I was earning 6 figures, entirely independent, and surrounded by a community of loyal friends who genuinely valued me. I had completely buried my past. Meanwhile, back home, my parents were learning the real price of their favoritism. Without me there as the scapegoat for their problems, the cracks in their perfect family dynamic started to appear. Julian, used to having everything handed to him on a silver platter, flunked out of 2 different colleges within his first 2 years. He refused to take an ordinary job, insisting everything was beneath him. To preserve his extravagant lifestyle, Julian piled up enormous personal debts, which my parents foolishly paid off by refinancing their house and draining their retirement savings. When his demands continued, they finally realized they were sinking. In their desperation, my parents started looking for me. It wasn't because of love, regret, or some sudden wish to reconcile. They didn't miss their daughter. They were drowning financially. Julian was a monetary catastrophe, and they needed someone to rescue them. When they accidentally discovered my business registration while searching for local contractors in the area, they thought their prayers had finally been answered. They had no idea that the independent businesswoman they were about to face was the same girl they had abandoned every summer. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was examining blueprint house plans in my office when the front door swung open and my parents walked inside. They had aged considerably. The smug, immaculate appearance they once carried was gone, replaced by worn clothing and desperate faces. Behind them stood Julian, looking miserable and completely out of place in a designer jacket that was obviously beyond what they could currently afford. "Poppy," my mother gasped, her eyes filling with fake tears as she hurried forward. "We've been searching for you for years. How could you simply abandon your family like that?" I didn't get up. I simply stared at them with a calm, indifferent expression. "You're trespassing on private property. What do you want?" My father stepped forward, attempting to preserve his old commanding tone. "We're your parents, Poppy. You owe us respect. We found out about your company. You're doing well while your brother is struggling. We need $150,000 to settle Julian's debts and keep our house from foreclosure. We sacrificed everything